I also just wanted to take this opportunity to introduce my new colleague, Emmeline Andreessen, who you will have seen just pop up. Emmeline is the new Senior Officer at the Access to Justice Foundation, working on the Network for Justice. She'll be working with me to support the Justice and Innovation Group and run the meetings. So please do contact her with anything you need, and she'll pop her email address in the chat when she introduces herself there. All right, let's get started. So the first section of our meeting this morning is going to be on tool and resource demonstrations. We've had another great crop of development since our meeting in September, which I know showcased a lot of tool and resource demonstrations. So we'll be using another good chunk of time today to get some more interactive sessions on new developments. So first up, I'd like to welcome Becky and Steve from the Transparently project. This platform features a number of different tools which can be utilized to deliver services flexibly to meet user needs. It's really comprehensive. It's a really interesting tool. So Becky, over to you.
Oh, thank you, Martha. Can everyone hear me okay, hopefully? Yep. Okay, so 5 years ago, only around a third of family law cases had full legal representation on both sides. And actually, over that time, this has now declined down to only 20% of cases. So economic pressure is one of the leading causes of the decline. And, you know, in reality, this is a problem that's only going to get worse with everything that's going on right now. So when there are financial pressures, it's very easy for service providers to increase their prices to maintain their revenue. You know, that's business. But actually, what that means is that legal services are going to become even less accessible for people. And we know that people that don't obtain legal advice are at a significant disadvantage. 20% of their cases are rejected by the court. And of those that are heard, 90% of them achieve worse outcomes. Now, Steve and I have been clients ourselves, so we know firsthand how valuable good legal support is. And what we wanted to do was to find a way that private individuals could engage with family law professionals, even if it's only for a minimal amount of time, to support them through their legal matter. And that's really kind of what our platform does. So it enables legal advice and support to be delivered flexibly, whether that's full representation all the way through to bespoke schedules of unbundled services, which are matched to the client's needs and resources. So the obvious win for law firms is that they can maintain the same rates, and they can actually attract clients who would never have considered going to them in the first place, which maximizes their revenue potential. But the big win, and the one that we are most passionate about, is that clients can have much better legal protection. They feel a lot more in control, they can be more involved in their case, and they can actually engage with a lawyer as their resources will allow. Now, we're slightly conscious that unbundling is something that lawyers tend to have reservations about, and that's really because, you know, they need to be able to assess whether the client is really comfortable with the process. They also need to have full control, despite not managing the client or case full time. And they also need all activity to be fully tracked and audited if required. And we try to incorporate that into the design of the prototype that we're going to show you today. So I think if I share my screen. Can everybody see my screen?
Can do, yes, Becky.
Okay, brilliant. So as you can imagine, there's quite a lot of functionality, and we only have a really limited amount of time today. So I'm just going to show you one or two features that are particularly geared towards supporting vulnerable people. I'm just going to switch my video off if that's okay, just to kind of save on my bandwidth. So I'm signed in as a lawyer. I'm new, so I've only got a couple of clients, Melanie and Patrick. And what our system does is it arranges all client information in one place, kind of like a digital client file. So if I select Melanie, this is all of her information that's stored, as I've just mentioned, and I'm going to select the conversations. Now, what we do, the conversations are separated out into 4 channels. So the top one is conversations between the legal team and the client. So I can see Melanie's name on there. Then we have the conversations, which are the sidebar ones, which is just between the legal team. Then we have the observed conversations, and this is between the client and their former partner. And then lastly, we have conversations with the legal team on the other side, if that's relevant. So I can see that there's a message from my client, so I'm going to go in and take a quick look at it. We all kind of know what messaging services look like and feel like and how they function. So I can see that Melanie's contacted me and she's having a bit of a problem. She wants me to take a look at the conversations that are going on between her and Tom. Things are escalating. So if I go back to, sorry, my chat's like blocking my screen. Right, let's go back to there. So I'm going to take a look at what's going on between the 2 of them. And I can see that here there are 3 messages from Tom that Melanie hasn't looked at. She's obviously feeling a bit vulnerable and she needs us to help. So if I open the very top message from him, okay, I can see that things are starting to go wrong. And I can see the content of what's being sent to her. But what I can see is actually on this final message, you know, things are fine. You know, Tom's seen sense and he's going to stick to the arrangements. Now, if this wasn't the case, I can intervene. And what I can do is I can either go back to my conversation list as we saw before, or I can just click on this little button here, and this brings up in situ conversations. Oh, sorry, my Zoom is taking over my screen. Right. And these are the 4 conversation channels that I mentioned previously. This feature is available anywhere in the platform, so it doesn't matter where you are, what you're doing, and it's always based on the client that you're working on. So you don't ever need to worry about contacting the wrong person or, you know, anything like that at all. So if I had selected the other side, this gives me a little warning that I'm going to be communicating with the other side. And what I can do is I can then send them a message. And this can happen in real time. So as I'm opening and viewing the conversations between Melanie and Tom, I can be contacting the other side and we can work together to resolve that issue without needing necessarily to involve the clients. Now, if I was Melanie and I was logged into the system, those messages would still remain unread. So if they were particularly abusive, I could just leave them shut and I wouldn't have to look at the content at all. But actually this problem is resolved, so I can go back and I can contact Melanie and say, look, Melanie, no problem at all. And she can go ahead and she can open them and she's confident to do so. So we've also added in a couple of little handy features to the system. Every message is permanently stored. So unlike emails, they can't be deleted, they can't be forwarded, they can't be edited. You can't select a message higher up in the chain, remove the content that makes you look bad and forward it onto your legal team and say, oh, I need you to intervene. And we've done this deliberately so that professionals get the full context of every issue that your client is raising with you. And that way you can help them, you know, in the best way possible. Messages can also be tagged. So you can add as many tags as you like to your messages. These are bespoke, you can create them as you want. So it doesn't matter if a message is relevant to different cases or matters. You can just simply add a tag for both, and then you can add that to your evidence bundle later down the line. All messages also have metadata on them. So you can see exactly when it was sent, when it was delivered and read by the client or the other party. And this is automatically made visible if you want to extract it, print it, add it to the bundle, whatever. Now, we've done that slightly differently for the clients. With clients, we give them only like a top level of metadata, so they can see that a message has been sent and delivered. But what they can't see is that it's been read. And we actually did this on purpose because when we did some market research, we actually found that seeing that a message was read caused higher levels of stress for people and actually increased the acrimony between former partners. So we've taken that out deliberately. Now, I've only got a little bit of time, so I'm just going to go to the task section. There. Now, if I select Melanie again, I can see that Melanie's got one matter, her divorce matter, and this is her divorce matter dashboard. So you can see over here on the left-hand side, she's got a number of tasks that have been assigned to her. She's also got some key dates, one of which is coming up on the 14th of December. And I'm just going to quickly run through. It's a very, very simple task, initial registration. And this is one that we just created for today. So we've approached task management slightly differently. What we do is we take every form and we create a digital version of it. And what that means is that we can have a lot more flexibility over how it's administered to clients, how we can collaborate and support more vulnerable clients throughout the process. So as you look at the screen, each card represents a question within a task. And obviously this is super simple. There are only 3 questions in it. Everything starts on the left-hand side in the unreleased column. And as it progresses, it jumps over. So I can release a question and it will jump over to in progress. When it's unreleased, the client is actually prevented from completing it. They can see the question on their side. So for example, if they need to go away and gather some information to answer the question, they can do so. So it means they can kind of start the process. But actually in doing this, this lifts the pressure for the clients because they know that there's no expectation on them to actually start working on that task yet. As soon as you release it, as I have just done now, the client will get a notification and they can then start working away. And what we've done is try to make the system as flexible as possible. So as a lawyer, you can either add all of the tasks you want to complete. Let's say you've had your initial meeting with them, you've identified everything that they need to do. You can then add those to the client matter, release everything at once, and then they can just start. And you have total visibility of the work that's going on. But if a client needs a lot more support, you can then answer the questions on their behalf, then release it to them. And you can literally do that question by question. So for people that need a lot more time, a lot more hand-holding, time to think, time to process, you can slow the process down for them. I won't go into the mechanics of the negotiation process because I'm really conscious that I don't have a lot of time left. And I'm really kind of hoping that Martha might invite us back so we can go through that in more detail. But just one final point I wanted to show you. Every question has advice here. So what you could actually do is have multiple versions of the same form, but with different advice that's tailored to the needs of your client. So for example, you could have a version of a form for domestic abuse victims or perhaps another version for high net worths. And you can update this advice as much as you like. So let's say there's a particular query that keeps on coming up time and time again. You can tailor the advice based on the feedback that you're getting from your clients so that you can support them a lot better. Lawyers always have the final approval. So you can work with your client in real time. You can literally watch as answers are being proposed back to you, and then you get the final say as everything moves over to being complete. I think that's more or less all I've got time for. I perhaps stop sharing. I don't know if anyone's got any questions.
Thanks so much for that, Becky. Yeah, please do jump in with questions, anyone who has any. I suppose my question for you guys is, what kind of support are you looking for to kind of, and where are you at in terms of development of this tool? Kind of what stage are you at and where are you hoping to get to?
Okay, so the stage we're at the moment, we've built a prototype. We're currently testing it thoroughly at the moment. What we're really looking for is for people to support us with that process. So we're launching a pilot program. We would dearly love to have a group of law firms supporting us with that, just looking at it, playing with it, giving us feedback so that we can then inform the next stage, which would be developing the MVP to take out to market.
Brilliant. And from the kind of the frontline kind of free legal advice community, is there any work that we can be doing there with you guys to kind of support this or utilize it or test it in different scenarios that would be useful in terms of kind of getting some of that development work underway?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, all help and support really, really welcomed. You know, we're looking for input from everybody, every single level, every different type of law firm we can possibly get our hands on. We're not just looking for large law firms or medium or small. We want to look for, you know, advice centres, for law centres that are offering free advice and help to people as well. So yeah, as much input as we can get. Oh, Steve, I think you're on mute. Sorry.
Yeah, it's been a very long program at this point, and we've spent probably the last 3 years researching and talking to people, but certainly at this stage, now that we actually have something that people can physically see and use, any input really, particularly from understanding what the needs of frontline organisations are, how that would be deployed to people that may need it, what the mechanisms are, just literally understanding how people work is absolutely critical to us at this stage. So any input from any organisation would be gratefully accepted. The more we know, the more we can make this a seamless experience for people who want to use it, either or. I mean, it's a free to client service. Ultimately, it's not about, you know, charging people for issuing the actual service itself to the client who actually is at point of need. It is a free service, but it's understanding how those services are delivered, how that communication is made, points of contact, how new individuals are sort of onboarded in any part of that process. Very, very valuable information to us. So any and all contact, as Becky has said, yes, please. Anyone who might have any opinions or views, all are gratefully accepted.
Fantastic. And then I can see Fiona's put a couple of questions here in the chat about the compatibility of this system with other systems that might be in use. I know we've talked previously about kind of how it fits in with pre-established case management systems and the like. And also, I guess, a question then about it's free to use for the users, which is brilliant. Is there a licensing system for professionals on top of that?
Yeah, so there won't be for the pilot. All the while we're learning, you know, we want to do that, and we don't want any barriers to law firms. The costs for a law firm are very minimal. It's around £12.50 per client per month, only while the client is active. So once the case is closed, there's no cost to the law firm for that. Obviously, you get to retain a copy of the information, the client file. And yeah,
I think the important thing is it's not an advice platform as such. I mean, our entire purpose is to connect the right parties to each other. So while we've shown a very simplistic client with lawyer relationship, this could quite easily be client supported by police domestic abuse worker. It could be supported by specialist agency. It could be CAFCAS involvement. It could be any agency. So we have the facility to connect multiple people to a vulnerable individual's case. They all have various permission levels, so confidentiality is maintained. They can see the appropriate amount of information. So it's all about connecting those people that need to be brought to bear on a particular problem or situation, particularly where a vulnerable person is involved. So yes, we rely on the lawyers. Expertise is where expertise is due. So the lawyers carry on doing their good work and advising. We simply enable those connections to take place and dampen down any, as much as we are able to, dampen down any adversarial conditions. So in other words, providing full transparency, providing full visibility to both sides to minimize the opportunity for situations to escalate out of control. That's really what we're about.
And in terms of learning about the systems that other people are using, we absolutely need to do that right now. You're quite right, Martha, to have brought that up. We need to learn how our system will interact with systems that law firms are using. And that is part of this pilot programme, which we'd be looking to do.
Great, brilliant. I can see Raj has put a really helpful offer in the chat around
Thank you, Raj.
onboarding law firms, which is fantastic.
Yeah, thank you very much.
But I think building on that, and maybe something we can come to at a future session, is something about the different roles that this tool enables. And something about, obviously, if you're a practicing lawyer operating in this area, there's something about how this tool can be utilized to help your practice. But if you're not, there's also an element here about this tool connecting to you to practice that might not be accessible in your local area or in your local space, or as part of your organization. So it can be a tool for when you see those vulnerable people in need, another kind of arsenal that you have to go to and utilize if it's something that works for your organization.
Yeah.
No, very much so. You're not limited to any form of geographical area. So a specialist support worker could be based anywhere in the country and could still participate and actively help a vulnerable individual located, hundreds of miles away, as is the need. It's all of that information is there. Their involvement is managed and controlled. Client confidentiality, as I say, is protected, but by the same token, you have access to a huge amount of additional resource within a local area that you otherwise would not have been able to gain access to.
Absolutely. Yeah. Brilliant. Well, thank you guys. Sorry, go on, Becky.
Sorry, Martha. I was just going to say, I just noticed Wendy's comment about Resolution. We have tried to contact Resolution, but not been very successful so far. So if anyone has contacts that they could introduce us to, that would really be appreciated.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, guys. And yeah, definitely something to pick up at a future session when we have some more time and can do some more workshopping.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Martha. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Next, we're going to be talking with Rose Rees-Jones from the National Archives with Find Case Law. Rose will be giving us an update on the new service and the way that they've designed it to try and support everyone accessing judgments, particularly those who are less experienced in navigating the law. Rose, over to you.
Hello, excellent. Thank you so much for having me, firstly. So yes, I'm Rose. I work on the Find Case Law service, and that's run by the National Archives, and I'm a user researcher, so it's my job to do all the hard work for people so that it's a simple and easy to use service. So I think I'll share my screen and I'll share the homepage of the site, but before we jump straight in, there's probably two things that's worth bearing in mind. So firstly, with the National Archives, it sounds like an obvious thing to say, but in April 2022, this year, for the very first time in history, the state started to receive court judgments and tribunal decisions to preserve as public records. And this is a brand new sort of national archive of court judgments and tribunal decisions that could last for, hundreds, if not thousands of years, hopefully. So it's a really exciting moment, I think, really, for making sure that these really important public records are both kept safely, but also underneath the Public Records Act, we have to make sure that everyone can access these records, regardless of the reasons why they want to have access to these really important documents. So, of course, court judgments have a lot of really important legal value, but there are also other reasons and other motivations that people have to look at the court's decision making, and we have to support those user journeys as much as people trying to access what the law is. So that's a really exciting dynamic. The second thing that's probably really important to bear in mind as we go through is that this is an alpha service. Nice bit of jargon in there straight away. And really, in digital development, what we mean by that is that it's experimental. So alpha phase is typically a time when you experiment, you change things quickly, and you learn as much as you can based on running lots of little tests all the time. And we decided to go public with our alpha experimental stage, so that we could learn from real users via feedback, and so that we could test and develop the service incrementally, working towards a more mature service that's meets all of the user needs out there. So we thought that was the simplest way to sort of capture the range and diversity of needs that people have from these really important judgments. And so just a quick note straight away, similarly to Transparently, we are really actively listening to what users are saying about the site at the moment. We're actively inviting people to take part in testing. You all in the room are also really important in that we're really keen to make sure that the service works just as well for you, for the people that you work with, as well as it does for people who might be accessing it for slightly different reasons. So your feedback is really important, and please don't be shy, come forward. We're a very small, friendly team, and we really respond to that kind of feedback. So yes, talk to us. So with those two things in mind, this is the Find Case Law service. So this is essentially a central archive, and we have developed a website that helps you interrogate that archive and helps you search through and find case law. So what I'll do is, rather than suggest how you should use it, because we're learning from users still, I'll show you the most common behaviours that we're seeing from users. So up until August, our most common users were legal professionals who knew exactly what they were looking for, and so they would typically search by a case name up here, and the most common searchable case name, there will be no prizes for guessing what it is, but here we go. Vardy v Rooney. So search here, and then straight away they would start to get some really relevant results. Typically the first one is the one that mentions the case names the most, and so this is what they would find. So you'd find an HTML or a web view of the original judgment. Now that in itself has posed lots of challenges for us in balancing out what Word documents look like in particular versions of Word that people might have when they're writing the judgment, versus what accessibility needs people might have from navigating the web, and how to make those two sort of marry up so that it feels both authentic and from the judge as the judge proofread it, but also that it's accessible for people using assistive technology or needing to access the contents of the judgment via the web view. So we've got this download PDF, which is as close as a copy to the original Word document that we could have as possible, so that if you absolutely need the complete styling and you're doing a forensic view, that's the place to go. But if you need to know the contents of the judgment, this might be an easier, more accessible version. So this is typically what they look like. It's a really interesting balance, because we are a government department. We also have a duty to make sure that our service is fully accessible to everyone who needs it. This is a really good principle, of course, because if we work for making sure that people who are blind can access it, then people who have conjunctivitis, who are temporarily unable to access things in the way they normally would, can also access that contents. So it's a really important principle that we're inclusive right from the very start. But it's an interesting balance here. So this is typically what they look like. Judgments tend to be very long for web pages. So we have introduced a bit of sort of skip to the end and back to the top, because lots of people are looking for the decision straight away. Which tend to be towards the bottom of the judgment. So that's the kind of early stage behaviour that we've seen from legal professionals, typically because they have access to things like Westlaw and LexisNexis, which are really powerful legal research tools that are very well established. And so we're seeing when they need something quickly and perhaps they don't want to log in and they know what they're looking for, we've seen that kind of behaviour to date. Since August, we've started to see new emerging user groups coming onto the site, and they're trying to browse the site, which is something that we're still actively learning about. There are various different ideas that we have in development that we're working really hard on, one of which we refer to internally as enrichment, but that's hyperlinking cases and legislation cited in judgments, so that if you want to browse and find related cases to a particular judgment, they will all be hyperlinked within the judgment here. So that's a little preview of the kinds of ways that we're thinking that we can improve the service in terms of helping people interrogate that central archive. But there are many other ways that we can improve. And again, I'd like to encourage everyone here to give us feedback about what it is in their day-to-day life, the moments in which you need to access case law in your day-to-day life, the context that you're in. Everything is really important to us. We really want to make sure that these judgments work as well for someone who's on a mobile phone, maybe in a court that doesn't have the best Wi-Fi or the best signal, and they just really quickly need to reference a particular judgment, or we need to make sure that it's inclusive for everyone, and that context is really important to how we design the service. So please do come forward and talk to us. The easiest way to probably do that is you'll see there's this alpha feedback survey that runs along the very top, so it will follow you around the site. At any point you can click to leave feedback and you'll be taken to a survey tool, and at the end of that there is an opportunity to have a more meaningful, more in-depth conversation with us by volunteering to take part in the search. We use a whole range of different methodologies, but you can always indicate which one you would prefer. So if that's an interview, we're also very happy to come to you, to come on site if it's something that you want to show us in person about the technology that you're using or the circumstances in which you're needing to find case law. So that's probably the best place to go to try to volunteer to take part in the research, and which of course would be eternally grateful. And we also do provide a £20 gift voucher just as a token of thanks, because it is really the nuts and bolts of how we develop this service. And then finally, for any developers that might be in the room, I just want to bring it away from the service that we've developed to interrogate the archive and show you that down here we have also developed 2 new licenses for reusing the contents that is in this archive. So if you want to republish a judgment on your blog post, you probably do that underneath the Open Justice license by default. This allows people to reuse and share judgments and decisions on their own sites and services. And there's a duty to make sure that you are sharing the most recent version of that judgment. But otherwise, it's really about that sort of individual resharing. If you want to do something that's a little bit more snazzy and you want to maybe do some computational analysis, run some queries over the judgments that we have within the archives, then you'll need to come down here to the transactional license. This is free. It's terribly named because it's a free license, but it's applied for. And this is really as a protection on all of the personal data that is held within judgments. Often there's a lot of personal information there. So you have to fill out a form that states that you follow the 5 safes framework, which is hopefully something that lots of developers will be familiar with, which is all about safeguarding the personal data. And then that will go to our license team. Hopefully it'll be approved and you can make your own services. You can scrutinize and query the collection of judgments that we have as under that license. So that was pretty much a whistle-stop tour of what we're doing, but I could talk endlessly in some of the more detailed areas. So I really welcome questions. But yes, the most important point is that we are at a very early stage of development, and we are incrementally developing based on user needs, user feedback. So your input really does influence how we make our design decisions going forward, and your voice is really, really important to us.
Rose, thank you so much. I can see from the chat that it looks like a tool that everyone's just been waiting for. It's getting some great reception. So thank you so much for coming and introducing it to us today. If I can leave you to pick up some of those questions from the chat, but I think one of the things that I really enjoyed hearing more about was your designing journey and the learning that you're taking from that and how you're going to replug it in. So that might be something that we come back to on for a more in-depth session on designing for accessibility and inclusion as well, because that's also been a point that's been really
absolutely
brilliant.
Very
Thank
happy
you
to
so
come
much,
back, yeah.
Rose. Brilliant, thank you. Okay, next up we are welcoming back Anna Salopatinis from Oxford University Centre for Socio-Legal Studies. Anna's previously presented on the Centre's work with HMCTS and some of the videos around court use that they've been involved in developing, but in this session she'll be taking us through their new project, Designing for Inclusion, which is designed for frontline agencies. Anna, over to you.
Once again, thank you so much for having me. The feedback that I got from this platform in relation to our last project and just the ability to discuss it and to get it in front of so many people was invaluable. So, you know, I'll start with my thanks. But a bit like Rose, it was really lovely having that nice segue around inclusion. We're also very concerned with inclusion. And in completing the last project that we did, which was a series of films to help lay users access online hearing that involved a lot of research, and they're now available on the HMCTS YouTube page. But as a result of the kind of success of that project, we were able to get some more funding. And what we did with that is we designed this new project, which we're now a little bit more than halfway through, which is creating a design guide for the advice sector. So, and essentially this is something, while we've used a lot of research in it, it's something that's very much built on the knowledge that's already in the sector. We're actually catching it at a, we've done our first range, I'll get into this in a second, of focus groups already, but just for a bit of information. So it builds on the success of this previous project. And essentially what we've been trying to do is to create this design guide to support community legal advice workers. And it's done in a way that is mainly for smaller organisations, those sorts of organisations that might not have a communications team or even a communications person. So it's broken down into a whole range of key sections and offers advice generally on how to produce. So we're not interested in the content. We know already that the advice sector does amazing work in terms of getting the right information to its users. What this guide is useful for is looking at the format, looking at those accessibility issues, looking very much at how to communicate with different audiences and how to use different kind of communication formats. So we've been doing this in partnership with HMCTS, Advice UK, the Advice Services Alliance and the Law Centres Network. And we've also been able to manage to get some funding for those organisations, so which is very important because we know that they're already very stretched and we don't want to be using their time without being able to contribute as well. So essentially the first phase of the project had us seeking information from the advice sector. And this was amazing. We learned so much. The design of this design guide has changed drastically based on the information that we got from users. So we asked them this range of questions around formats, around best practice, around the resources, other considerations, user types and their specific needs. And we got some really amazing feedback. So at the end of that process, we ran 11 focus groups and managed to talk to a total of 59 people, which we were just in awe and so grateful for that feedback. And that's all very much fed into the design guide. So where we find ourselves now is that we have managed to put together this this kind of pilot version. I don't know if pilot's the right word, this initial copy, this version 1 of the design guide. And what we're doing, like the other couple of presentations before me, it's another ask. We would really love some additional feedback on this. And this can be in a range of forms. Yeah, we're just hoping to find people who may be willing to have a look at it. Doesn't have to be the whole guide, a section, a part of it, especially if you work with a particular user group and are quite are quite well versed in kind of helping them, we would very much like to hear it. But to give you a bit of information about the guide, essentially it's divided into 6 key sections, and this has all been based on the research that we did initially. So we look at who are you designing for, that looks at the steps on reflecting who your users are and the best information formats for them. We then have a little bit of information about the design process. So in reflecting on the previous project, we learned a lot about testing, evaluating, redesigning, what questions to ask and where to go to find those kind of sources to help you along. So that second section looks very much at that. The third section looks at a general overview, because of course, if you're using text, the text that you put on a website and the text that you put in a flyer and that you might find in other sources, there are some concepts that are useful across different formats. So here we look at things like language, we look at structure, and something that came up very much during the first round of focus group is images, concerns around copyright. If you're working in the advice sector, where can you get free images? How can you use free images that doesn't put you at a copyright risk? We've also provided some information on creating your own images and also potentially outsourcing, the creation of some graphics or images. So the fourth section looks at format specific guidance. So here we have identified a range of key formats that people either use or were very keen about finding out more. So podcast was one that, while not a lot of people are using at the moment, a significant number of people that we spoke to were very interested in exploring the possibilities. So we've got information on that, information on films, a brief explanation of some tips around accessibility and things like that. So in this guidance, we look at both at making these specific formats accessible, as well as ways in which to put them together that's relatively low cost and low labour. In the next section, we look at accessibility and inclusivity. So we look at a range of conditions and user types and think about how best to serve their needs. So yeah, we break it down, and there's a lot of things that you can do that works across these particular groups. And of course, you will need multiple formats, because there's, as we know, there's no single format that works for everyone. And then finally, we have a section, a lot of people in the various focus groups and discussions express concern around commissioning work, finding the right people for the job, how to have those discussions, how to check that they know. So it's quite a brief section at the moment, but we've got a section on that as well. But I am just going to stop sharing this particular document and share another one, which is the guide itself. Okay. So can you all see a Word document at the moment?
Can, Anna, yes.
Okay, that's wonderful. Okay, so what we're asking for feedback on is this review version. So essentially, you can see how it starts. We've provided a brief introduction, goes through these various sections, and then the various sections that I've spoken about, which you'll see here. Anyway, it continues. I won't take you through it. So in the chat, as soon as I'm done with this, because I'm not a very good multitasker, in the chat, I'm going to put a link to the design guide and a link to, so essentially it's a link to a Dropbox folder that has the design guide and then a request for feedback, what we're looking for. Please keep in mind, this is very much a pilot version, which means, you know, let it rip, tell us how to improve it. You know, this certainly isn't cemented in stone. We have put a lot of work into this. I hope there haven't been any glaring oversights, but if there have been, tell us, and tell us in as strong a language as you can. Like, we're very much interested in making this useful. And at the moment it's in kind of a print version format, but it will be made available as a website as well. So some of those other, you know, things are often easier to access in that format, and the hope is that we will be passing it over to our advice sector partners to keep it updated. Yeah, so my request for you is, for those who are interested, and potentially have the time or maybe willing to engage. I also know that this request is coming several weeks before Christmas, so everyone's probably busy and potentially not that much time to spare, but yeah, we would be enormously grateful is anyone who's willing would open the guide and would give us some feedback. And please don't feel obliged that you have to comment on the whole thing. If you're someone who works with a particular user group, find the section that relates to that user group, have a look at it, and then let us know. We want to make this useful as possible. I think I just saw something pop in the chat. We're hoping around mid-January, we'll make a range of changes to this document, and we're hoping to launch it sometime in February. So yeah, if it would be wonderful if you could get any comments to us by early to mid-January, but the sooner the better, because as they come through, we'll start making some of those changes. Yeah, I think that's it for me. Just, you know, we would be very grateful for any and all comments. So please take a look.
Anna, amazing. Thank you so much. I can see how much work and effort has gone into making this as comprehensive and as it can be. And I know from your previous work as well, the sensitivity of which you design for the advice sector. So I'm sure it'll be absolutely fantastic. And I know people will want to read it and engage with it and feedback as well. Thank you so much for sharing that link. We'll also circulate this around to the wider group as well, so hopefully that
would be amazing. So essentially I've just put in 3 links. The first link is to the Dropbox folder with the instructions and the guide. The second is my email, any questions, concerns, and the third is our project website, where I've also embedded the link to the Dropbox folder. So if that's easier for you to copy or send. Yeah, thank you so much.
Amazing, you're more than welcome. And we'll have to do a little bit of a shout out as well when it launches. Make sure you invite us all to the launch event.
Thanks.
Thanks so much, Anna. Lovely to hear from you as ever. I'm going to move us on to the next section of our meeting today, which is about what data is telling us about legal needs. So data collection, analysis and use is something that we've discussed repeatedly at this group as we try and navigate the challenges engaging with data poses along with the opportunities that it provides. So for this session, we're going to look briefly at a number of projects that are collecting and sharing data and examine how we can maybe make more practical use of those tools and others to meet user needs. Just to flag right now that I know this is a huge topic, it is also something we're considering taking over to our longer, deeper dive insights and learning sessions as well. So if there is interest generated here from this chat, and we decide collectively that actually we need some more time to go into these issues in more detail, and that would be useful, there's also the option for us to utilise one of the insights and learning sessions next year to do that. But for the time being, and firstly, I'm really pleased to welcome back Ned and Abby from the Ministry of Justice Legal Support Policy Team, who are here to talk about the Social Justice Problems Report, which brings a range of data sets together to build an indicative picture of legal needs and provide insights into national and regional trends as well. So Ned, over to you.
Thanks very much, Martha. Unfortunately, Abby couldn't join us today, so I'm afraid you're all stuck with me, but hopefully I can do a decent enough account of the tool. Okay, so yeah, I'm here to talk a little bit about a tool we've been working on in the MOJ called the Social Justice Problems Report. Just to introduce myself, I am Ned Sharp. I work in the Legal Support Strategic Projects team within the Ministry of Justice. And yeah, we've been working on this for the past, well, since kind of COVID, a little bit into COVID-19. I'll talk a little bit about the background to the tool. I'll show you some images of a prototype version of it and talk a little bit about its purpose and next steps. So hopefully you'll have a good sense of what the tool is, what it looks like, and might be able to do a bit of thinking about how it might be useful to you in the future. So moving on. Oh, there we go. So yeah, just on the background to the tool, we needed when COVID-19 hit, we needed some evidence on how legal need was changing in the context of the pandemic to help inform decision making around how best to meet the challenges that the pandemic was posing to the advice sector. Usually we have to rely on legal needs surveys as a way of monitoring changes in legal need, but obviously these are static, just kind of snapshots in time, and they're quite slow and expensive and impractical to run, particularly during a pandemic. So that wasn't really an option for us then. We convened an expert panel to discuss different options of how we might therefore track legal needs, and the recommendation they came up with was to make use of proxy data as a means of tracking some of the factors that influence legal need. So that's what we did. We developed a tool that did just that. The data that we've got in there at the moment focuses on social welfare related areas of law. So it's got information on housing, debt, employment, and welfare benefits. Having pulled the prototype together, we think it can be useful in a number of ways, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, but we hope that it may have uses beyond being able to provide a bit of tracking of some of these factors influencing legal need going forward. So this is an image from the
Ned,
JPR
sorry
itself.
to interrupt you. I can only see the first slide of your presentation.
Apologies for that. It's going through for me. Maybe I'll just abandon doing the slideshow and
yeah, it's always a bit tricky, isn't it,
this.
presenting in presenter mode. Yeah, that's working now.
Apologies for that. Hopefully that gives you you can see that well enough. So yeah, sorry, I'll skip ahead to this slide. This is the one I'm talking about now. So this here is an image of the tool itself. This is essentially a bit of an introduction page on there, showing the sort of a wider policy context to the subsequent tabs in the report. On the left hand side there, what that shows you is it basically highlights the number and proportions of cases moving through the civil, family and tribunal system. And then on the right, we've got a bit of a rudimentary timeline of key events that we think would influence some of the data that you can look at in the dashboard. So it highlights things like you know, when lockdown was imposed and when the moratorium on evictions was put in place. As we're just trying to highlight some of the key things that might explain some of the trends that you see further on in the tool. And yeah, sorry, just in the interest of time, I'm going to be kind of whizzing through these quite quickly, so apologies for that. The next image I want to show you, this one is essentially a summary page that gives a bit of a snapshot of the rest of the data that you look at in the tool. It highlights, essentially highlights a lot of the trends that you might that you can see in the data. And it's color coded to try and make it quite easy to kind of draw your attention to things that we think might be important. So red indicating a negative trend, orange a stable trend, and green a positive trend. The other thing to note about this page and about various of the other tabs that you'll see in the tool, it has on the left hand side here this blue box with some key points. What we want that blue box to do is just provide some very high level analysis of what the data is telling you on that on the tab that you're looking at. Moving on to the next one. This is where this tab is where we get into the kind of real meat of the tool. This is the tab on housing data, and as you can see, it presents a variety of data pertaining to housing legal needs. We've tried to cover quite a few aspects of it. So on, here on the left hand side, we've got some kind of upstream factors essentially numbers of people falling into mortgage and rent arrears, numbers. We've got some citizens advice data here, and looking at the traffic on their website, looking at the housing pages, and the numbers of people seeking advice. And then as you move on to the right hand side of the page, it's got some of the data around numbers of people engaging with the court system, and then actual repossessions of properties. Again, you've got the kind of key points bit on the left hand side there as well. There's also a lot of functionality to these graphs that I can't show you here on a slide, but you can do in the actual tool itself. There's a little slider on the left hand side there that enables you to isolate specific time periods, and all the graphs will then zone in on that specific time period. You can also zoom in on the graphs and kind of manipulate them in a variety of ways to hopefully make them useful in a number of scenarios for the user. And it's also very easy for you to click through to the original source of the data that's being presented here. I won't show you the tabs for debt, employment and welfare benefits, because they're very similar to this one. This is essentially a good representation of what the other pages will look like. But I will show you one last of the tabs on the report, as this one is a little bit different. It's the area level data tab. So this one enables you to isolate individual local authority areas and look at some of the relevant data pertaining to that area. So the one we've got on our screen now is showing data relating to Newham. It's got things like what's the word? Oh, indices of multiple deprivation and things like and some income data for the relevant area. We're actually doing a bit of work on the area level data that we use in the tool at the moment. We're hoping that soon it will have a bit more in there to enable slightly better tracking of the prevalence of different legal issues, but can't make any guarantees on that, as a data scientist is currently trying to pull that together. So moving back to what we think this can be useful for, we've identified 3 kind of high level aims for the tool. They're there on the screen, and it's as well as what we think it can do, it's also important to be very cognizant of what it doesn't do. It cannot provide a direct measure of legal need. It's important to bear that in mind. It also can't give the full extent of demand for the services, because a lot of the data that it uses, it's data collected from about like the provision of services from various organizations. Some of those organizations will be operating at capacity, so therefore it's not necessarily an accurate representation of the full extent of demand, but we do think it gives a useful indication of some of the trends. And also, I mean, Martha, you said just at the start there, data collection and use in the advice sector is a huge issue, and this tool will absolutely not solve all of the issues in that regard, but I like to think of it as it's an attempt to make the data that we do have work a little bit harder, and hopefully the kind of sum of all of this data being presented together in this way helps us to get a fuller picture of some of the factors influencing legal needs. So yeah, just finally to round off, in terms of where we're up to with this, we're working with a data scientist to continue to improve the tool on the basis of some of the feedback we've got from preliminary user testing, and we're also exploring potential publication routes, with a view to kind of making this very widely available in the near future. I will stop there, very bit of a whistle stop tour, but if you've further questions beyond this meeting, please do get in touch with myself or Abby in my team. Her email is on the screen there now, and I'm sure Martha will be happy to link people to us if needs be afterwards. But yeah, hopefully that was useful for you, and I will stop sharing my screen.
Thanks so much, Ned. And yes, very useful. And I think you're right in kind of identifying where stuff is useful, and also where its usefulness kind of peters out and having a boundary there. I think this represents a really important kind of first step, though, in terms of making that data more visible and more accessible. It gives us kind of a better starting point than where we have been in the past. So I know there's a couple of questions in the chat there. I'll just pick up on a couple. Does the tool include any data that isn't currently available from other government sources? So is it a collation of pre-existing data, or is there also new data in there from other sources?
Yeah, sorry, I should have been clearer on that. This is not new data, it is collating existing data. With the idea of making it, by doing it like that, we can automate a fair amount of it, and yeah, hopefully it becomes something that requires kind of minimal maintenance in the long term.
Yeah, brilliant. And I know the tool is still in development, but is there any ability to intersect different legal issues and see the demonstrations of that?
So that's not at this point. I think one thing that I think with this tool is it's kind of in its first stage, and yeah, where it could go in the future, there's all sorts of interesting things that we could look to explore in how you might make use of all of this data alongside one another. But at this point, no, it's not on an automated level. However, you know, once it's out there, you know, and once people have access to it, people can kind of look at the data and, you know, make connections and identify trends themselves in whatever way that they're able to. But yeah, not something that the tool can do itself just yet.
Brilliant. And is this tool kind of a precursor to additional work around legal needs and kind of legal needs studies or surveys?
No, I wouldn't describe it as a precursor, no, but something I'm very interested to do in the near future is have a look at what the tool tells us alongside any upcoming legal needs surveys. I think that the two can probably provide quite an interesting kind of point of comparison, to see, to see how some of the factors we've got in the tool itself actually interact with the more precise data that you'll get from a legal needs survey.
Brilliant. That's been hugely informative, Ned. Thanks so much for coming along and giving us an update. I can see a couple of the people that we work with have worked with you on this. They say it's really useful and helpful. So
just one more thing. Sorry, I noticed one question of will it be made can it be made available? So as I said, we're looking to make it fully public in the nearest future. But if you would like to have a play around on the existing prototype, bearing in mind it is a prototype, do get in touch, as that is something we can share with you. Yeah, thanks very much.
Thanks, Ned. I'll share yours and Abby's details with the group so that they can reach out if they'd like to be involved.
Real, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, next we're going to welcome Dylan Brown from LexisNexis. LexisNexis have recently published a report on the geographic locations most in need of legal aid support, but also with the least access to it. So Dylan is here to talk us through how they built this report and what it tells us.
Okay, hi everyone. I am a content marketing producer here at LexisNexis, and I produce a whole bunch of different reports every year. Most of them are very focused on the commercial elements of law, but this time I've had the opportunity to look into legal aid deserts, which is part of our Rule of Law initiative. So as a business, we're very focused on everything that we do does have to have a link to the rule of law and advancing that. So this has been a real pleasure to work on. And the whole purpose of this has nothing to do with our solutions. It's purely just to advance this as a topic and hopefully help in showcasing some of the areas that really need some legal help. So I will share my screen. I have also shared the link to this report, which is now live in the chat as well. So I thought it would just be easier to show the actual report itself. So I'm just going to go through this in quite quick fashion, but I will go over what we've found first, and then I'll go into the methodology, because I'm conscious that the whole point of this is to look into the data side of things. But I thought the findings might be interesting first, just so that we have a bit of context. So we looked into 3 different practice areas. So we looked into housing, crime, and family law. So for housing, we found that over 12 million people live in legal aid deserts for housing. And we found, here you can see an interactive map which shows the different scales. So we've given some of these, we've given them the title of legal desert, and then we're looking at low, medium, and high. We've done the same for family, as we can see here. And we've done the same for crime, which we can see here. So now we'll go to the methodology, then we'll circle back to those. So the way we've done this for legal aid is, so we're looking at legal aid providers and being able to showcase the areas throughout England and Wales that have a high demand or a high need for legal aid, but no supply to it. And I'm sure most of you on this call would know just how controversial this topic is, and how there's really no way of being able to get everyone to agree on these certain ways of being able to characterize the legal aid desert. But what we've done is we've made a mass amount of assumptions using proxy data, which I'm sure all of you have had to do at some point in your research as well. So what we've done is we have measured legal need, which we've defined as legal incidents, which would be, it really differs based on the different practice areas that we look at. Housing, for instance, an incident would be something like homelessness or evictions. Family would be domestic abuse, and loads more as well. And then crime would be any sort of crime as well. And then what we've done is we have looked at the bottom 10%. So we've given each of the local authorities in England and Wales a metric, and then the ones that fall into the bottom 10% of that metric we have defined as a legal aid desert. Obviously this isn't the best way that we would have loved to have done this, but it's the only way that we could have done this with the data that we had provided. All of the data, it's worth pointing out, is all government data as well. So we've looked at publicly available government data to make these judgments as well. Yeah, so then we also we calculated the legal need and supply by 10,000 to make it comparable to the population densities. And then we measured traveling distance as well. So we thought that that was really relevant, particularly for a lot of the practice areas that we're covering where traveling might not be necessarily available or a feasible option. So we have defined 15 kilometers as being a reasonable distance to travel. Obviously that can be up to debate from anyone, but that's just what we decided would be the most reasonable. And we have done that from 15 kilometers from one local authority to another, so they can travel between the two. And we've defined that as the center point of that local authority. And just for simplicity's sake, we have not done the neighbours of our neighbours, if that makes sense. Yeah, so that's how we defined a legal aid desert. Yeah, so then moving back to these metrics here, so we found, yeah, 12.45 million people live in legal aid deserts for housing. And here are some of the areas which we pinpointed as the highest need for housing. And here's a map of them here as well, just so that you can all see. We've got some really interesting commentary in here if you do want to have a look later. We've got some commentary from Crisis, which we reached out to kind of have a look at what would be the biggest needs from a legal perspective for homeless people from Crisis's perspective. Then for family, we looked at, we found that just over 1 million people live in legal aid deserts for family. and those areas would have 0 providers, and we actually found the best served areas have 14.43 providers per 1,000. And by providers, we mean, we've used this as the government's list of legal aid providers or officers as well in those areas. Yeah, and just pointing out around housing as well, we did find that we only had access to public cases. We obviously didn't have access to private cases, which is a huge means that the data that we are presenting here is a fraction of what it actually would be, or would be a lot higher. And that's something that the Law Society has attested to as well, and they've actually given some commentary later on in here that goes into why they also believe that it would be much higher as well, which we completely agree with. And then crime, we found 2.12 million people live in legal aid deserts for crime. With crime as well, the way we did this was we had to obviously work within police jurisdictions with the data, which was a bit of a challenge. So we had to merge police jurisdictions with local authorities as well. So that was a challenge, but we did manage to find a solution there. And as you can see, here is the result of the areas, and then the top 15 areas are here as well. Yes, so we also have done an overall finding of, we've combined the 3 of these together, and we've come up with these 7 areas that we believe to have the highest demand for legal aid. This, of course, is pure speculation. It was combined from 3 practice areas using a load of proxy data and a load of assumptions, and only 3 areas that we're covering as well. So this is, of course, very flawed, but also very interesting. So I guess that summarizes the report in a way as well. We're really just wanting to spark a conversation. We have engaged with quite a few different people as well. So we've spoken with LawWorks, who have included some commentary. We've also spoken with the Free Representation Unit, the Secret Barrister, and the Law Society as well, and got their comments in here to have a little bit of a debate. So yeah, I think that was all I wanted to share. So we'll go back to the screen.
And thank you so much. It's always interesting to have another kind of set of data and parameters of that included, as well as the research findings as well. So really useful. I know you said at the beginning that this wasn't a solutions focused report, but do you think there's anything additional we should be doing with this? Is there any additional research you think it would be particularly useful for us to focus on as a community in terms of developing these thoughts further?
No, I think most people in the legal profession are very aware of the shortcomings of our current legal aid system, and I'm sure even people working in that and legal aid would be very transparent about that as well. From the people we've spoken to, they have been. I think it's more just trying to see. I think it's particularly interesting with how COVID has really reshaped how legal aid can actually be done. As like a big discussion going on at the moment is around helping from afar, doing virtual assistance from afar. I think this has kind of caused a lot of businesses and a lot of legal organizations as well to really rethink how they're helping people. And I think looking at these legal aid deserts, we can see there's a potential solution from a virtual perspective that we could help a lot of people from afar without having, like, when we couldn't have potentially done that 10 years ago or 20 years ago, particularly as organizations are moving more to the cloud and they're advancing their solutions as well. So I think that could be interesting from a pro bono perspective, but then I really do want to emphasize pro bono is there for support. It is not there to replace the current legal aid system as well. And obviously those working in legal aid are doing a fantastic job. So this isn't to put down any of the great work that they're doing as well. So I think it's more just seeing how we can help with the tools that we have at our disposal. We had a team of analysts who worked on this, and we came up with some very interesting ideas that potentially a lot of other organizations don't have the time or the expertise to deliver something like this. So that's where we wanted to step in. So yeah, hopefully that can help in highlighting some of the problems. It was also worth flagging from their virtual perspective. I think that's one of the solutions discussed in this report, but one of the obvious flaws with that is that, I mean, helping from a virtual perspective can also not be very suitable in a lot of these situations as well, particularly in situations like domestic abuse or anything to do with cases where that's involved in court systems, which wouldn't be appropriate. Hopefully that all makes sense.
Absolutely. Then thank you so much. That was really wonderful to hear. I think there might be a couple of questions in the chat. If I could leave you to pick those up, that would be really useful. For the time being, we're going to move on. So pleased to welcome Savita Narain from the Family Rights Group. And the FRG recently published an impact report on their advice and advocacy service. I know this is a lot of us struggle with defining and collecting the data to demonstrate our impact. So I think this is a really excellent opportunity to have Savita with us to talk through their process and how they found that experience.
In the meeting is my colleague Jessica, who is from our legal team. So thanks a lot for asking us to come and share how we go about doing the evaluation of our telephone advice line. This is something that we've been doing for the last 7 years, and we just recently produced a 2022 report. And so Martha asked us to quickly come along and share that with you. Just to give you some background about what we do at Family Rights Group in terms of advice and advocacy. Our advice and advocacy service is for parents, grandparents, relatives, friends and kinship carers who are involved with children's services in England or need their help. We support families to understand the law and child welfare processes. And our service is unique in terms of combining both legal and social work knowledge. This slide just gives you a brief, quick overview of the different parts of the advice service. We have an advice line which is open every working day. We have online forums where people can talk to each other, get peer support, but also advisors give advice. We also have a website, and we've just launched with HAL's funding a new web chat pilot. So if there's anyone out there that's also piloting web chat, I'd be very happy to talk to you about it, because it's something that we're learning about as we go along, and we started this week. Just in terms of what people call us about, this slide just gives a very brief overview. 24% around child protection, 35% about child proceedings, children in care. And just to note that with our current funding, we can't answer all the calls that are coming through to us. We are only able to answer calls with 4 in 10 callers. So the evaluation model that we use was developed in 2015, and we worked with New Philanthropy Capital, NPC, to develop it. The aims of the model are to show that our advice and advocacy make a difference to the families who we help, that we're delivering advice and advocacy and information to the highest standard, and that we are cost effective. Having this bespoke evaluation model has meant that we've been able to benchmark the service year on year using the same methodology, and so that's really valuable, and that we don't have to pay for external evaluations. In terms of how the model was developed, it used MPC's approach to impact measurement. They worked with our team to develop a theory of change for our advice services, which described the intermediate and long-term outcomes. And then the measurement framework for the advice line was based on the theory of change and those long-term outcomes, which one of the primary outcomes, for example, was that families are empowered to engage, challenge, and effectively make informed decisions. So measurements around those kind of things were collected from our case recording system, and also we developed new feedback surveys which were kind of based on the outcomes and asking people about their experience of our services and the impact that it made and the differences it made for them. And then MPC constructed an economic model to estimate the cost benefit of the advice line in terms of costs saved by averting the need for long-term care and statutory involvement. The model uses data collected by the measurement framework, so it's data from Salesforce and data from the surveys, alongside data about the costs of the service and costs of care and statutory involvement. It's a very complex spreadsheet, and there are things that we change year on year that we get from the measurement framework, and there are things that stay static, and it uses the Monte Carlo analysis, which I couldn't explain, but I have information that explains it to me. Sorry, the evaluations of the service have been undertaken regularly since 2015, and the last one was just produced. The data for the model, as I said, is collected through 2 online surveys. The first survey is sent straight after people call us within the first week, and the second survey is sent out 4 to 6 months after people have called us. This just shows briefly some of the findings of the first immediate survey. One of the interesting things is that 84% felt that they understood the law better, 90% felt that they understood their rights and responsibilities better. This shows, this slide shows the findings from the medium-term survey. 80% of people felt they had a better understanding of what they had to do. And one of the most important findings is that 45% agreed that the support that they received from us made a difference, a positive difference to the local authority plan for their children or child. And this is the findings from the economic model, which is really important for us in terms of showing the cost effectiveness of our service. And it estimates that for every £1 invested, the service saves the state £15.58. And that's 15 million across the 2 years of the most recent evaluation. So we are aiming to update the model in the coming year, because at the moment the care costs in the model are still based on 2015. So we know it underestimates the cost of the impact of our advice in terms of savings to care costs. That link is the link on the slide will take you to the summary evaluation and the full evaluation, which are on our website. And this slide is just basically giving more information about how to contact us, which I can also put in the chat. So that was a quick overview of what we do to evaluate our advice line service, and it's a really interesting model. I'm new to Family Rights Group, so it's really satisfying to be able to have something that kind of shows the impact of the service that you work on.
Fantastic. Savita, thank you so much. That was so interesting. I know kind of the logic models for monitoring and evaluation, particularly to some of the kind of the really key aspects that you've identified there, such as ability and understanding around, actioning advice and legal issues, as well as the public spending initiatives, is something that I know we all talk about a lot as kind of really important and really central to our work. So it is great to see that there are successful models out there which are being used and utilized that can show advice and the impact of advice in that context. So definitely something we'll be coming back on. It would be great to hear how you find updating the model as well, and how that relationship with MPC develops further.
And if anyone's like interested in like the finer detail, then they're welcome to get into contact with us, and we can like share more kind of experience, more of the data, and like share the spreadsheet, and you can see how that works.
Amazing. Yeah, it sounds like a mammoth spreadsheet. I'm going to stay away from it for the time being.